Hi, I'm Neddie. Last week, my track Figment VIP came out, which is a remix of my older track, Figment. So today I thought I'd show you around how I went about making Figment VIP and show you some ideas for how you can make your own VIP. So let's get into it. Okay, so the way I went about making my Figment VIP is I used stems. So I just have the Figment stems just lined up here. And that goes for any other section that has the same kind of elements as the original. So in this VIP, I just let the intro play out on its own. And then during the build-up, I made a few changes. One change I made is bringing in this little vocal that kind of plays throughout the first drop. So this is the original, like, vocal right here. So I added a chorus to make it wider. Then saturated the shit out of it and then, like, turned it back down. Then I removed some low end because it's, like, in excess. OTT'd it. And then you get the extra crispiness. Took out some more low end. Kind of took out some of that like annoying resonance. And that kind of brings us to the drop. So starting off with the initial impact of the drop. This is a lot of layers, as you can see. So start with the first thing. We have a really fat sub. This sub is just, this is a triangle wave actually. I don't really use that too often. As you can see, I have the noise turned up pretty high as well. I'm doing some weird distortion methods. I don't really usually do this, so that's kind of interesting. And then we have this thing. Without the effects, it sounds like this. So this is just doing some like vowel-y movement. Again, I'm using some asymmetrical distortion, just some hyperdimension basic processing to really get it to be a little bit fatter. And I'm using like a high pass type beat. Then we have a phaser. That's really to give it some like extra tonality that otherwise it wouldn't really have. And then I'm cutting out the low end, saturating the shit out of it, cutting some fundamental out of it, and again cutting out the low end that the saturator brought back in. And then OTTing it to make it extra crunchy. That brings us to the lead. So this is a square wave being automated by a LFO, which is doing like this also square pattern, but it's going between the coarse pitches really fast, as you can see. So it's basically just doing that, but like so fast that you can't hear the transitions between the two. So it just becomes one note, and that's kind of how I got that. Just some basic processing again, saturating it a bit more, and cutting out the low end. Then we also have this, which I think is just a sub, but then like raised a few octaves. It's just a sine wave with the level, you know, distorted very hard. Same kind of processing here again. And then we have the chord stack. Interesting chords. This is just your average chord stack. It's got a compressor and a hyperdimension. It's kind of the hyperdimension that's giving it any like spice at all, and the simple delay afterwards to give it like a little bit more tail. We also have this thing. So this is kind of a lot of processing, so let me take all this off. This sounds pretty stupid without it. So this is just a sine wave with some hyperdimension, and it's like clipping really hard. So then we have an arpeggiator, then a saturator to distort the shit out of it, kind of make it a square wave, a vocoder with some low bandwidth. Then I have some EQing to like really reduce the clipping frequencies that the fat rack will cause, so that's not like clipping too hard. Then we have an EQ which is taking out the harsh high end. An OTT to kind of bring it back. An EQ to take out some more high end, just kind of like overall reduce the volume and take out this frequency range. A reverb to kind of like give it a little bit extra space. An auto filter, which I guess we'll just do some sweeping motions later. And another EQ to take out low end. And there you go. And then here a harmony comes in, which is just the same layer as this lead layer, but then it has a reverb on it, but then, you know, on the lead layer, so it kind of like slightly pushes it to the background. Kind of hear it there. Okay, and then we have this little like weird offbeat chant thingy. Which I have no idea what this is without the processing. Just a weird chant, I guess. I have no idea what that is. So I took a vocoder, took the bandwidth down a little bit, and increased the formant a lot to kind of get a different tonality. Added a fat rack, added an OTT afterwards. Cut out the low end and added some high end, and a simple delay. Kind of make it ring out nicely. And then we have this top layer, which I believe is just a, yeah, it's just a saw wave, same processing. But what's really giving it this tonality is this vocoder. We have a saturator, EQ, another EQ, a reverb to kind of slightly push it to the background, and then an OTC to bring it right back, EQing out the low end, and then a reverb rack, which basically will just help me do reverb sweeps. And then we have this thing, which is just the same thing as before, but then instead of the arpeggiator going all the way up like this, just like in a straight pattern, it's a different kind of algorithm, which will, I think what it does is it'll go from like these two notes here, and then like it'll go like this one, this one, this one, this one, and then that one. And I believe this is the exact same processing as before, probably just a little bit more tweaking to get the EQing just right. And that brings us straight into this section. So we have this little like tease of the original melody. So this section is mostly the same elements as the first section. You know, we have the same basses as before. We have a different chord stack, which is just this chord stack over here from before, but then I guess it has some different LFO modulation. We have a little ARP, which just does, you know, extra stuffs to make it like a little bit more interesting. And then we have the original melody coming in from Figment. This layer of the melody is just a saw wave, I think. So this one is just a like 2 detuned saw waves. This melody is originally just like a saw wave and a saw. This melody is originally just a saw. That's not a saw wave. That's a square wave. Okay. This original melody is just a square wave and a saw wave. You know, with different distortion methods, it kind of creates that sound, as you can see. Very similar processing as before. Just some more saturation to get a little louder. EQing at the low end, and then adding a reverb. Kind of push it to the background, and then turning it right back up with a utility. And then an EQ to take out the low end. Okay, and then next we have this. Which is, it's a vocal. I specifically remember this took like absolutely forever to get just right, to like get this note to work. So this is just a really saturated vocal, same processing as this one. And then this, which is a flute, I think, like from Banjo-Kazooie. And then this just also has the exact same processing. And then together it sounds like this. And then also the actual original melody here. The main thing causing the grit is, again, the sub and the growly layer. That's really important for this, because if it didn't have this growly layer, it would just sound very plain. Doesn't have the same punch. This really just fills in like the low mids a lot better. This chant is still playing over top of the whole thing. And then we just go an octave up. And these chords kind of go like halftime. So it's kind of just like mirroring this original chord progression type thing. And then we have a little tape stop here. And then we immediately get brought into this like midsection. And this is like a Rhodes piano. And somehow, like, I managed to give it like this weird texture that is completely unintentional, but it just happened. Adding this vocoder on its own doesn't really do much. I just have the depth turned down a little bit, format turned down, took out some low end, and then OTT the shit out of it. Get it louder. And then you can kind of already hear it. I don't know what's causing it, to be honest. It's a nice texture. Completely unintentional, though. Added this to make it extra dramatic. I'm just adding a limiter to bring it back up, remove some frequencies that I didn't like with an EQ, and another OTT and interface. And as you can see, this does like the little solo that would normally come after the initial drop in the original Figment. I just decided, hey, wouldn't that be cool? But then in like a midsection format, so yeah, I went for that. And then we get to the melodic Riddim drop. So the way I made this, same sub as before, just being spammed in triplets. Same with the little growly thing. That brings us to the lead. It's just this thing, but then like duplicated. It does appear to be different though. It's like doing some weird like lip modulation. I guess the logic behind that was to make it like a little bit different between each hit, so that it's not like exactly the same every time, even if it's like super subtle. Because like when you're doing like an extended like triplet thing like this, like it's easy to get it very boring. And then we have this top layer, which is just like a saw wave, very simple, just has a little filter on it. Give it a little bit more volley movement. And then we have the chord stack. Simple saw wave stack. We have this thing, which is just an ARP, doing some triplets. It's actually going like really fast, and I think it's just the volume automation from this, which is like really doing the work. And then we have some OTT, simple delay, stuff like that to really get it nice and beefed up. Next layer. Oh, okay, so this is like randomized. So I have an arpeggiator on random. every time you play it back, it'll sound like just a little bit different. So that's like a really nice way to keep it like interesting, even if it is very subtle. And then we have another saw stack. Very basic as well. And that brings us to this little growl, which is just like a bass I made like a while ago, I think. Yeah, just the end of a bass. Saturated a little bit to get the high end to be nice and gritty. And that brings us to this part. And my thought process behind this note was, this is one note below the relative major of the key. Basically, the key is an F minor. This is the root note. The relative major of F minor is G sharp major. This is your average major key, right? Very, very wacky explanation here, but stick with me. When you play this whole thing in context and you get to this note, and you don't play the last one, you want it to go to that last note. It's creating tension. What I did is I just spammed this note because it'll be very tensionful. Here, I can show you how this growl was made. Okay, so let me take off all the processing. So this is just a straight saw wave with some minor processing. And then we have a saturator, adding a auto filter, a phaser to kind of give it that like growly sound, a fat rack to really bring in every harmonic, an auto filter to kind of mess with the low end tonality, an OTT to bring in the high end crunch and kind of bring back the low end, a saturator to get it loud again, and then an EQ to bring in the high end and some 1K. And then you know, we're brought straight back to the original second part of the melody. And you know, it's the same exact thing as the other breakdown, just a different melody. And that just about concludes the Figment VIP breakdown. Some tips from me to make a VIP of your own: use stems. It's way easier than like going in your old project file. Ideas wise, definitely try to like expand upon what you already made, and I would really try to like make everything different but still keep some of the elements in, so that way you really get like a version 2 of your track rather than a whole nother track, you know. In this case, I really tried my best to keep the focus on the original Figment melodies while also completely throwing it around. So, you know, this part is completely different from any other part of Figment, like the original, but then this part is like sounds pretty similar to the original Figment. Same with the midsections. I really did my best to kind of keep the original melodies in there. I keep these, like a lot of the samples, and you can also just see that I'm using a lot of the original stems here, just to add that like extra spice from the original Figment. So those are my tips to you if you ever wanted to make your own VIP. And that being said, let me know if you like this video with a comment down below, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in another video. Bye.